Comic books house some of the richest, most interesting stories ever written, but they can be difficult for a wide variety of people to enjoy.
Characters like Superman and Batman were created in the early half of the 20th century and carry nearly 100 years of continuous storytelling up to the present day.
If a person doesn't know the dense history of these major characters that represent the medium, they might be discouraged from reading comics as a whole, believing that every story ties in some way to some larger continuity, and certain mainstream comics can be really complicated to jump into. Take Justice League Issue 1, a comic that started in 2018. If you want to read this comic, to understand it, you have to read a 4-issue miniseries, a random comic from the 90s I've never heard of, a company-wide event where 7 Batmen from other dimensions attack Earth, which has its own laundry list of tie-ins, and to understand that event, you have to read the previous Justice League run from 2016, and the Batman run which started in 2013, not to mention having a general understanding of the DC universe as a whole. All in all, it's a lot. Whew, I'm out of breath. But there are other, less complicated ways to start reading comics.
Comics are a more complicated medium than meets the eye. Not every story is a superhero story, and the visual nature of comics allow for creative ideas to be brought to life in a realistic way that could only be achieved otherwise with millions of dollars spent in special effects and CGI. Comics allow experienced artists to create beautiful and sometimes scary art with just the stroke of a pen. This unique trait makes comic books an ideal place to tell horror stories. One comic that shines in this matter is Manifest Destiny, an ongoing series about the adventures of Lewis and Clark throughout the American West. On their way, they discover mythological creatures and supernatural species. Without significant money put behind a television adaptation, Manifest Destiny could not be expressed in the most compelling and interesting format in anything except a comic book.
This is a comic I started reading at the beginning of quarantine, and I absolutely got lost in it. I finished it within a few days. The long-form storytelling allows for in-depth character studies to be portrayed over a period of many years, and it opens the door for content you just can't get in other media.
Such as the critically acclaimed Sandman series by Neil Gaiman. Sandman tells the story of Dream, an elder god of the universe, and his interactions with everyone from normal, everyday people to Lucifer to William Shakespeare. The stories in this comic are usually told in an anthology manner, keeping new plots unique and fresh. Once again, it's the type of story you can only find in comics.
This is a comic I started reading when I was really young, and it was scary and a bit shocking at times, but it inspired me to keep reading outside of my comfort zone, and find those unique stories exclusive to comic books. However, horror may not be your thing, and thankfully comics house complex stories in other genres too.
While comics can have stories that run continuously, they can also have short miniseries that can easily be consumed in under an hour, such as the science fiction series Chrononauts, which creatively and humorously handles time travel. Miniseries are a great place to start reading comics, as they're quick bites and complete stories that can explore original worlds. Image Comics, the third biggest comic company after Marvel and DC, publishes a lot of independent miniseries that do not take place within any shared continuity. Image Comics also published my favorite comic of all time, and this one is a superhero comic. Invincible is a comic that ran for over a decade, written by Robert Kirkman, the author of The Walking Dead. It tells an original story of the son of a Superman-esque figure within a new universe. It slowly shows the evolution of his personality and ideas, while also allowing for classic comic book tropes like parallel dimensions and time travel to be explored.
Invincible has over 140 issues, and I tore through all of them in under a month. It's a comic that I've gone back and reread multiple times after the fact. I've recommended it to almost every single person I know, and it's one of my favorite comics of all time. Comics are usually very quick reads, so going back and rereading one of your favorite stories doesn't take as much time as going back and watching a whole TV show. But it also allows for a larger story than could be told in a movie. One comic that I reread almost every year is the Scott Pilgrim series. This cartoony, video game-esque romance series is one that I always have fun rereading, and I'm always picking up on running gags or small jokes every time I reread it. My brother and I will usually reread it around the same time, and it's a hilarious journey every time we do. and comic books are a big interest that we both share. The unifying characteristic of every comic I mentioned today is the lack of history associated with it. They don't have any required reading like other mainstream superhero comics I talked about before. They are all great books that anyone could pick up and end up finding their new favorite story in. Overall, comic books may have more depth than most people initially believe, but there's usually a comic book to suit everyone's interest. While I can highly recommend each of the individual things I mentioned today, I hope this serves as a message for you to go out and explore comic books on your own. You might just find something you really like.